For 42 terrifying days, an entire city lived under a shadow so dark that even the bravest refused to step outside after sunset. It began quietly, just a single scream echoing down an empty street, a news headline most people scrolled past without a second thought. But what no one knew then was that this was only the beginning. A killer had entered the city, not from the darkness, but from the crowd, calm, unnoticed, blending in so perfectly that he walked among thousands without a single person realizing they were inches from a predator. In those early nights, people dismissed the danger. It's just a one-off, they said. These things happen. But behind closed doors, detectives struggled with a disturbing pattern, a signature too subtle for the public eye, a feeling that something far more sinister was unfolding. The city's heartbeat changed. Doors that once stayed open now slammed shut. Street vendors packed up before dusk. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every stranger seemed suspicious, and still he kept walking free. This is the story of a city pushed to the edge of panic, a place where fear spread faster than facts. While authorities tried to calm the public, they themselves were scrambling for answers, chasing leads that went nowhere, wrestling with mistakes that allowed the killer to stay hidden in plain sight. He wasn't hiding in abandoned buildings or dark forest. He was standing behind people in grocery lines, riding the same buses, passing groups of teenagers on their way home. The horror wasn't just what he did. It was how close he always was. This video will take you into the heart of those 42 days, the baffling first murder that should have been a warning, the fragile clues investigators overlooked, the way the city's breathing changed as fear took over, and the terrifying calm of a man who believed he was invincible. It will reveal the double life he led, smiling at neighbors in daylight, stalking victims by night, and the desperate hunt to stop him before the next body fell. It will explore the chaos that erupted as rumors spiraled, the tension that tore through the community, and the moment the truth shattered the city's sense of safety forever. This is not just a tale of crime. It's a story about the fragility of trust and the terrifying reality that evil can wear the most ordinary face. The city's peace was shattered on a humid Thursday night when the first victim was discovered lying beside an abandoned warehouse road. At first glance, officers believed it was a mugging gone wrong, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. The kind of tragedy cities absorb quietly. But the scene whispered a different truth. There was no theft, no struggle, no chaotic signs of a fight. Instead, everything seemed almost unnaturally arranged, as though someone had taken great care to leave a message no one yet recognized. The medical examiner noted a strange detail, a precise injury that suggested control rather than chaos, intention rather than impulse. Still, the report was filed, the case marked routine, and the world moved on. But in that moment, the killer was already watching. Blending into the gathering crowd, he stood among the bystanders who whispered theories, his face blank, absorbing the fear like fuel. To him, this wasn't the end of an encounter. It was the beginning of a game. And the silence that followed became the city's first warning, ignored by everyone who wanted to believe in normalcy. Neighbors talked about the tragedy at dinner tables, shook their heads, and turned off the lights. No one sensed how close danger now stood. The detectives assigned were already drowning in other cases, unaware that this would soon become the storm dominating their lives. As they gathered preliminary information, there was an unsettling lack of clues. No witnesses, no motive, no leads. Just an eerie emptiness around the victim's final moments. That emptiness would soon become the signature of a man who understood how the city breathed, how people hid from uncomfortable truths, and how fear grows quietly before it explodes. And while everyone returned to their routines, the killer walked away unnoticed, confident that his next move would go undetected, because the city had failed to listen to its first silent warning. It didn't take long for the calm to crack. Less than 2 weeks after the first murder, a second body appeared, this time in a residential neighborhood. The victim was found near a playground that usually echoed with children's laughter, but on that morning, the park was silent. The pattern alarmed detectives instantly. The injuries, the calculated placement of the body, the chilling similarities. It was no longer possible to ignore the truth. Someone was hunting, and the city had just become the killer's chosen territory. News spread quickly, first through morning radio shows, then through the relentless churn of social media. People shared warnings, speculations, and wild theories, each more frightening than the last. Some insisted it was a gang initiation. Others whispered about a psychopath stalking the streets. The police held press conferences urging calm, but their guarded language only fueled the panic. The phrase, "Please stay vigilant," echoed on every news channel, becoming a chilling mantra of uncertainty. Residents began altering their routines. Joggers stopped their early morning runs. Shop owners installed new locks. Parents refused to let children walk anywhere alone. A city once known for its bustling nightlife began emptying as soon as the sun dipped, but the killer was unfazed. In fact, he seemed to thrive on the fear. Every siren that cut through the night was a reminder that the city was beginning to understand his presence, but was still powerless to stop him. The police received hundreds of tips, most of them false. Every shadow suddenly looked like a suspect. Every stranger felt like a threat. But the truth was far more terrifying. The killer was not hiding. He was right there in crowded streets, in bus lines, in grocery aisles, calm, observant, and utterly invisible. While the city trembled, he watched from behind ordinary eyes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. What made him so dangerous was not his brutality, it was his normality. To the outside world, he was a nobody. A quiet man who worked an average job, lived in a modest apartment, and blended into the flow of everyday life without raising the slightest suspicion. Coworkers described him as polite, punctual, the kind of person who never caused trouble. Neighbors often saw him watering plants on his balcony or carrying groceries up the stairs. Nothing about him screamed danger. Nothing even whispered it. But beneath that harmless facade lived a predator meticulously shaping his double life. He studied people the way others study books, patiently, quietly, and with unsettling precision. He moved through crowds unnoticed, memorizing routines and weaknesses, choosing victims who wouldn't be missed immediately. To him, this was not impulsive violence. It was a craft, a twisted art form perfected over years of observation. At night, his true nature surfaced. He kept a hidden journal, detailing the city's habits, alleyways, shortcuts, blind spots, and security cameras. He walked the streets like a hunter mapping its territory. While others slept, he wandered freely, picking up pieces of the city's rhythm and storing them like weapons. What made him even more chilling was his calm. There was no rage, no emotional storm inside him, just a cold curiosity and the satisfaction of knowing he remained invisible. Police psychologists would later struggle to categorize him. He didn't fit typical patterns. He wasn't driven by revenge or desperation. He was driven by control, by the intoxicating power of walking among millions who had absolutely no idea he existed. And the more fear the city showed, the more confident he became. Every headline, every warning, every shaking voice on the news only confirmed that he had achieved what he wanted. A city living inside the world he created, where he was the unseen ruler. As the body count crept upward, the pressure on law enforcement grew unbearable. Detectives worked around the clock, but every promising lead dissolved into dust. 2 separate witnesses reported seeing someone suspicious near the crime scenes. A man wearing a dark jacket, lingering too long, watching too closely. But the descriptions were vague, contradictory, impossible to pin down. When officers brought in a person matching those details, the investigation took a costly detour. The suspect was interrogated for hours. His alibi was shaky, his behavior nervous. To many officers, he seemed guilty. But when surveillance footage surfaced, proving he was miles away during one of the murders, the department had no choice but to release him. The real killer, meanwhile, had watched the commotion from afar with disturbing amusement. The city's fear had created its own suspects, its own diversions, perfect cover for him to continue. Communication issues inside the department only made things worse. Reports were buried, tips misplaced, information passed between divisions too slowly. A crucial fingerprint found on a discarded item took days to be processed due to lab backlogs. By the time results came in, the killer had already struck again. Detectives found themselves apologizing before families, the grief in their eyes becoming another weight on the team's shoulders. The media criticized the police relentlessly. Headlines mocked their failures. Talk shows debated their competence. And online communities began forming their own theories, some logical, others wild and damaging. The city's trust crumbled. People no longer believed the police could protect them. And the killer? He continued walking freely, shielded not by skill alone, but by the chaos born from miscommunication, wrong assumptions, and a system straining under its own cracks. Each mistake wasn't just an error, it was another opportunity handed directly to him. Fear, once subtle, erupted into full-blown panic. By the third week, the city no longer felt alive, it felt haunted. Streets that were once filled with chatter now echoed with silence. Coffee shops closed before dusk, restaurants canceled late-night hours, and taxis refused to enter certain neighborhoods. Rumors spread like wildfire, each one stoking the flames of paranoia. People began questioning their own neighbors, glancing suspiciously at anyone who walked alone after dark. School attendance dropped as parents refused to let their children leave their sight. Supermarkets saw a surge in sales of locks, pepper spray, and home alarm systems. Some families even fled the city temporarily, choosing safety over stability. And in the middle of all this chaos, innocent individuals became targets of public fear. A man walking home with a hood up was chased by a frightened group. Another was accused by strangers in a crowded market, humiliated before police cleared him hours later. Social media transformed into a battlefield of panic. Every unidentified noise became a supposed attack. Every police siren meant another death. Dozens of sightings were reported daily, overwhelming the already strained emergency lines. But what the public didn't realize was that the killer exploited this chaos. Blending into a crowd already filled with suspicion meant he could move silently, choosing locations where fear swallowed logic. Behind locked doors, families slept with lights on. Some took turns staying awake at night. The emotional toll was immeasurable. Friendships fractured under suspicion, relationships strained, and the psychological weight began reshaping the city's soul. It was no longer just about the murders. It was about the destruction of trust, the erosion of safety, and the terrifying realization that anyone, anywhere, could be next. And as fear grew stronger, so did the killer's confidence. Chaos had become his perfect camouflage. With the city spiraling into panic, the killer shifted from silent predator to bold manipulator. For the first time, he began leaving deliberate, unsettling hints behind. A chilling note discovered near one crime scene read, "You're looking in the wrong direction." Another victim's watch was set to a specific time later recognized as the moment the police had released a previous suspect. Whether these were real taunts or coincidences, they ignited a terrifying idea. The killer was playing with them. Investigators debated whether to keep these details secret, fearing it would fuel more public hysteria. But rumors leaked, as they always do. Soon, the city believed it was dealing with a mastermind, a phantom who mocked police efforts. This belief only worsened the panic. Every mistake by law enforcement became proof of his intelligence. Every new clue sparked fresh waves of dread. Meanwhile, the killer continued walking freely through the neighborhoods where people whispered about him, He watched the fear he created like an artist admiring his work. What thrilled him most was not the act of killing itself, but the ripple effect that followed: families afraid to leave home, police scrambling for clues, reporters broadcasting his shadow across every screen. His power grew with every frightened glance exchanged by strangers. Some investigators suspected the taunts were meant to provoke, to create a false trail, to twist the investigation into knots. Others believed the killer simply craved recognition. But one thing was clear: he was escalating. He wanted attention. He wanted chaos. He wanted the city to feel him everywhere, even in places he had never been. And with every new sign he left, he tightened his psychological grip, proving that the most dangerous killers are not the ones who hide, but the ones who show just enough to make an entire city tremble. After weeks of frustration and fear, the case finally cracked open, not with a dramatic confession or sudden miracle, but with a small, easily overlooked detail. A gas station surveillance camera captured a blurry figure lingering near the site of the third murder. Nearly dismissed as unusable, the footage revealed a key clue when enhanced: the killer's unique gait, a subtle limp in his left leg. It wasn't a name, but it was a starting point. Detectives traced that detail across hours of footage from different locations. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The same figure, same build, same limp appeared near multiple crime scenes, always at night, always leaving seconds before police arrived. A timeline was built, mapping out his movements. And finally, the paths intersected at a single apartment block. Inside the building's visitor log was a handwritten name repeated on several nights corresponding with the murders. The signature belonged to an ordinary-seeming man with no criminal history, no record of violence, and no reason to be under suspicion. Yet every piece of evidence nudged investigators toward him. The more they dug, the stranger things became. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, kept to himself, the classic descriptions that, in hindsight, take on an entirely different meaning. A deeper search uncovered a troubling past. Reports of animal cruelty as a teenager. A transfer from one job to another after coworkers complained about his unsettling behavior. Notes in his old school records hinting at emotional detachment and fascination with control. Piece by piece, the image became clearer. The ordinary man was anything but ordinary. Armed with this information, detectives prepared for surveillance and a potential arrest. For the first time, they felt hope and fear, because now they knew who he was. And if they didn't move carefully, he would know they were coming. As soon as investigators closed in, the killer seemed to sense the pressure tightening around him. Officers kept watch on his apartment, but he never returned after leaving early one morning. Panic rippled through the department. Had he fled? Was he planning another attack? Units spread across the city, scanning familiar locations where he'd been spotted before. The manhunt began silent, tense, and urgent. Every officer involved knew the stakes. This was no longer about catching a criminal. It was about stopping the next murder before it happened. They followed digital footprints, tracked his phone's last location, and interviewed anyone who had crossed paths with him in the past month. Each new clue painted a picture of a man preparing for something bigger. He had withdrawn cash, emptied a locker at a storage facility, and purchased items that hinted at travel or escape. But the killer didn't run. He hid in plain sight, using the city's fear as a smokescreen. At one point, officers came within seconds of spotting him as he slipped through a crowded street, blending with commuters like he always had. A street camera captured him walking calmly past two detectives who were searching for him. The breakthrough came when a clerk recognized him buying food late at night. Officers swarmed the area, closing off streets and alleyways. What followed was a tense chase through narrow back streets, the killer weaving through shadows with unnerving speed. Sirens echoed as police vehicles boxed in the perimeter. Yet he kept slipping, always one step ahead until he wasn't. Cornered near an old marketplace, he finally stopped running. But there was no fear in his eyes, no panic, only a chilling calm, as though he had expected this moment all along. And as officers approached, he simply raised his hands and surrendered. News of the captures spread across the city like wildfire. People gathered outside police stations, waiting for confirmation, desperate for closure. When authorities finally revealed the killer's identity, the shock was overwhelming. He wasn't a stranger to the city. He wasn't a monster lurking in abandoned buildings. He was someone people passed every day, someone who blended seamlessly into everyday life. Friends and coworkers reacted with disbelief, insisting he couldn't possibly be the man behind the terror that paralyzed the city. During the arrest, he remained eerily composed. No outbursts, no remorse, no resistance. As detectives questioned him, he answered with calm detachment, offering no insight into his motives. His expression revealed nothing, no pride, no regret, just an unsettling emptiness. Investigators described him as emotionally unreachable, a man who saw the world through a lens detached from humanity. The search of his apartment revealed the truth that neighbors never saw. Hidden notebooks filled with chilling observations. Maps marked with locations he often watched. Lists of people he followed. A meticulous documentation of routines, routes, vulnerabilities. The walls, once thought of as simply plain, concealed compartments holding small items stolen from victims, a trophy collection that silently testified to his double life. The city reacted with a mix of relief and horror. Relief that the nightmare was over. Horror at the realization of how close the danger had always been. Reporters broadcast every detail. Citizens flooded social media with disbelief. And the city collectively exhaled a breath it had been holding for more than a month. Yet beneath the relief lingered another feeling, one that lingered long after the arrest. The unsettling truth that a man capable of such terror had lived unnoticed among them for years. Even after the killer was behind bars, the city struggled to return to normal. Fear does not disappear with a single arrest. It lingers, clinging to memories and reshaping lives. For many residents, the streets still felt unsafe, the shadows still too deep. Parents continued escorting their children everywhere. Bars and restaurants hesitated to resume late-night hours, and people found themselves locking doors out of habit long after the danger was gone. Victims' families faced a complicated path toward healing. The relief of justice was overshadowed by grief for the lives stolen, dreams crushed, and futures lost. Community groups organized vigils, erecting memorials in places where lives were taken. Names were spoken with reverence, candles lit in silent solidarity. The tragedy had woven itself into the city's identity. Law enforcement underwent reform as well. New protocols were introduced: faster forensic processing, improved interdepartmental communication, and more advanced surveillance strategies. Investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case carried the emotional weight with them, many joining workshops and psychological counseling. They had faced the darkest sides of humanity and returned with scars invisible to the public. Yet, through all the pain, something remarkable happened. The community began rebuilding, not just physically, but emotionally. Neighbors who once ignored each other now checked in regularly. People formed watch groups, not out of fear, but out of unity. Survivors, families, and police officers stood together at remembrance events, speaking not of terror, but of resilience. The city had changed, undeniably. But in that change, a powerful truth emerged. Fear may shake a community, but it does not define it. Even as the memory of the killer lingered, the city reclaimed its identity stronger, wiser, and painfully aware of how fragile safety can be, and how essential unity truly is. In the end, the city learned a truth it will never forget, that monsters don't always hide in the darkness. Sometimes they walk beside us, unnoticed, wearing the faces of ordinary people. For 42 days, one man's quiet footsteps reshaped the heartbeat of an entire community, stealing sleep, trust, and peace from millions. And though the killer is finally behind bars, the fear he spread left scars that will echo for years. Yet amid the trauma, something stronger emerged, a unity forged through shared vulnerability, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, people stand together. Streets once emptied by terror slowly filled again. Laughter returned in small, hesitant fragments, and the city chose to rise rather than remain broken. Justice ended his reign, but resilience ended his power. And as life finally began to move forward, one truth remained clear: evil may walk freely for a time, but it can never outrun the strength of a community that refuses to surrender to fear.